Hey, how about it, race fans? Richard Allen of InsideDirtRacing.com and InsideCircleTrack.com coming at you with one of my richest ramblings for today. Today's Monday, August the 21st, following right on the heels of the NASCAR Cup Series race at Watkins Glen. I know that typically these richest ramblings are reserved more for dirt racing topics, but I thought I'd stray off onto NASCAR here for a bit as well because, as some of you may know, on their InsideCircleTrack.com, I ride a bit about NASCAR here and there, not as frequently as I ride on the dirt, but still, nonetheless, it's on there. But as far as the race at Watkins Glen goes on Sunday afternoon, it was just that was not a very entertaining race. I know the racing purists out there will say, "Oh, it played out the way it's supposed to," and they didn't have those phony stage breaks and all that to interrupt the strategy. Well, all that may be true, but if there's going to be a race, there needs to be somebody getting passed somewhere, and there was like virtually no passing in that whole race. I don't know how much I should have looked up the numbers, but it seemed like William Byron led that race all throughout. Almost once he got to the lead, the only thing that caused any sort of a shuffling or lead change was when they'd get on different pit strategies. But as soon as the pit stop cycles would play out, he'd be right back on top, and nobody ever got up to him. To illustrate that, Denny Hamlin ran second for a lot of the race with cars stacked up behind him, and it seemed like nobody could pass him, even though those cars behind him appeared to be faster. There's just no passing. So I don't care how much of a racing purist you are and how much you say, "Oh, that just played out the way it had to." It was just not very good. It was just not entertaining. And again, I understand the purist point that it's racing. I remember the whole Tony Stewart rant that he had back there a few years ago. They call it racing. They don't call it passing. But I don't care what anybody says. If there's going to be a race, there needs to be a pass every now and then, and there was nothing. I mean, I could sit down and watch a Formula One race, and I saw people on Twitter boasting about how short the race was. Oh, it only took less than 2 hours, whatever. No Formula One race takes more than 2 hours, and of course they just get out there once everything settles out after the start, unless they happen to have a safety car or something. It just plays out as they start unless there's a mechanical problem, and that's what NASCAR on road courses has become. Last week at Indianapolis Motor Speedway, that race didn't really have a lot of pizzazz to it either. I know it had a really good feel-good story with Michael McDowell in front row racing, winning, securing their place in the playoffs, and all this. So it had a little bit of that element, but still, it just honestly, it just wasn't really a very good race. It was just not very entertaining, and it does have to be entertaining. I don't care what anybody says. There has to be an element of entertaining in it, and it just wasn't entertaining. And yesterday's was even worse because you didn't get the feel good story. You got the guy who's won the most races all year, winning for the biggest powerhouse team in NASCAR. So there was absolutely no chance for a feel good story at all. This is a trend we've been seeing since the next gen car came along. At first in the initial few weeks of the next gen, when they started using it, there seemed to be some encouraging moments there. In particular, it seemed like the intermediate tracks got better, and that we thought, well, you can't possibly mess up the road courses and the short tracks. They're always going to be good. Well, as we found, that's not true. The road courses and the short tracks have just lost their zing. Some of the races at places like Richmond, which Richmond's, it's always kind of struggled to be any good anyway. But even Martinsville, I went to a race at Martinsville last spring. It was terrible. Same kind of thing. Byron got out front and just led the whole way. So that seems to be more of the trend with the next gen car. And if you look at the next gen car, really the car is just too good. That's the problem. It's a 5-speed with much better brakes than the old car used to have. So at places like, say, in Martinsville, they're downshifting and all this to save the brakes, and it's not putting too much stress on the tires. The reason why Martinsville and Richmond and those places have been good in the past is because tires wore out and brakes wore out. So guys were having to slow down way back in the straightaway so that they could make it through the turn. And then when you had other guys who had taken care of their equipment in the early part of the run, then they'd start passing those who hadn't. So we've lost that element now, because now anybody can get out there and basically run like you're qualifying every lap, downshift it, save the brakes, save the tires, and then just tear down the next straightaway. And that seems to be what's happening on the road course. It's the same thing. I mean, you might have a guy slip off the track and lose a couple of spots or whatever, but I mean, for the most part, these guys are too good. And when you put drivers who have incredible talent in a car that's, in all honesty, is just too good, I mean, nothing's going to happen. I know right at the very end, I mean, Kyle Larson, Austin Dillon had some little spat with each other over 19th place. I mean, who cares when it comes down to something like that? We need to be seeing races like that for the lead, not for 19th. When you think back at Watkins Glen, some of the great races, that race back there, I think is around 2011 or 12. Marcus Ambrose, Kyle Busch, and Brad Keselowski had just tremendous race, and but it doesn't seem like we're seeing much of that anymore. So the short tracks and road courses just kind of lost their zing, and I think you have to point at the car, because that's the thing that has changed. But in order for it to be a good race, there's got to be some passing. And yesterday's at Watkins Glen just featured none. It was just a status quo throughout most of the second half of the race. I tweeted there at one time, not much passing in the second half of the race, which was absolutely true. There wasn't. So anyway, hopefully they can get this worked out. You hate to suggest that they ought to unengineer some of the things that they engineered, some of the progress that was made, such as with the shifting and all that, because I advocated for a long time to have 5-speed transmission, but little did I realize what impact that was going to have. And the brakes have gotten so much better; they never wear them out. The tires are always good, never wear them out. So until some of that changes, this is just kind of the racing that we're going to have on short tracks and all this. And here's a disturbing trend too. As good as these teams are and as good as these engineers are, they're starting to figure out little nuances about the intermediate tracks too. So I'm afraid the next gen's going to kind of lose that thing it's got going on the intermediate tracks and just turn them back into single file running too. So anyway, but those are my thoughts, and we'll see if any change comes about. But that race yesterday was just not very good, and it was coming off of another race, which you can talk about strategy and all that, and running the race backwards and pitting at the right time. You can talk about all you want to. Somebody's got to get past somewhere, and that just never happened. So until next time, this is Richard Allen of InsideDirtRacing.com and InsideCircleTrack.com saying I will see you at the track.